Welcome to another exciting episode of the Nonprofits, where you can smell the holiday season. A time of joy, love, and apparently controversy. Solid Rock Bible Church in Iowa has decided to spice up their nativity scene by adding King Herod, the infamous ruler who supposedly ordered the massacre of babies in an attempt to kill Jesus. For extra flair, they've labeled him an atheist, because what better way to celebrate the season than comparing non-believers to a murderous tyrant? It's worth noting that the story of Herod's massacre is only found in one of the four Gospels and isn't supported in historical records. But hey, why let details get in the way of a good holiday narrative? What was once a simple nativity scene is now turned into a battleground for debates on public displays, religious freedom, and a naturally holiday drama. The true spirit of Christmas. This story is from KGAN by Nick L. Hodge and on November 8, 2024. I have to admit I found this a little interesting, but Cindy, how did you feel about the portrayal of Herod as the atheist in the church display? Do you think this comparison's a valid comparison, or is it a bit of a misrepresentation?
No, I think it's totally accurate, because we keep hearing Hitler was an atheist, Stalin was an atheist, and now we get Herod was an atheist because he murdered babies. He's pure evil, therefore he is an atheist. That's their argument in a nutshell. So no, I'm not surprised. It's just business as usual from some theists. Although something that this article reminded me is that atheists regularly score extremely high, usually highest or second highest, as the most disliked group in the US, with about 40% of people claiming to dislike them, dislike us. So it's not surprising to see those kind of associations between generally accepted bad people and atheists. To me, it's interesting because I don't see that in Europe. In the US, it seems that you're accepted as long as you believe in something, even if your belief is different than Christianity. You're more accepted than if you don't believe in anything, and I think that's the root cause of this is this belief that if you don't believe in a God, then you cannot be moral. That's so ingrained into the belief of most Christian sects in the U.S. that I'm not surprised that this is the outcome.
I did find it almost humorous how two-dimensional they played this concept. But AJ, how do you see the church's inclusion of Herod into the nativity scene anyway? Do you find it a bit ironic? I mean, what evidence is there for this actual infant massacre in this one gospel that talks about it?
Yeah, the irony is unreal. Like as Cindy pointed out, the church chose to include King Herod because he, specifically is portrayed as a baby killer that ordered the murder of all infants under the age of 2 in Bethlehem in order to hopefully kill Jesus. And so they see that as something to be related to atheism, to lack of belief. But they seem to completely ignore the fact that the very God that they worship also ordered the murder of all babies in Egypt in the story in the Bible. Did they suddenly forget like the entire story of Moses in their own book? But mind you, there is absolutely no evidence outside of the Bible to say that King Herod ever ordered the killing of all infants. Bible experts do not accept this part of the story because the only mention of this is in Matthew's gospel. And while he surely was known for mistreating his citizens or having some of them killed, which what king hasn't, right? Um, but there is no extra biblical evidence that indicates that he ever mass murdered infants at any point in his reign. There is no historical evidence of this. But you see, we are able to corroborate that he existed, how he ruled, when he ruled, where he ruled, but nothing about killing babies. So it's just yet another case of because the Bible tells me so, and you cannot tell me otherwise.
Well, you mentioned Matthew because that's where the story comes from. Also, Matthew talks about zombies near the end of the book because he talks about after Jesus died, the graves opening up in Jerusalem. So we know Matthew, the author of Matthew, was more than a little creative and theatrical, so to speak. But speaking of theatrics, Rob, what is your view on the theatrics of the nativity scene with King Herod? And also, I know that the Satanic Temple has done statues of Baphomet. What do you see going on here? How do you view these theatrics in general?
It's more spectacle, which is great. People love it. It's not quite the same when you compare what they've done with King Herod and Baphomet, because what they did with King Herod is point out another group that they want to demonize, whereas the statues of Baphomet is about their own organization. So it's not quite the same, but it's still, they're putting up a thing to incite a feeling in people. They know what they're doing. They want to make people look at it and go, that's awful. Whereas with King Herod, it's like, oh yeah, I can identify with them. They're trying to kill baby Jesus, and that makes me upset. So it's really similar. If it wasn't it's all very gross to me because they're trying to demonize an entire group of people who have a lack of belief, and the amount of people who do not have a religion has been increasing in America for I don't know how long. It's still not a majority, but it is increasing. Given all of that, I think it's funny. I thought that the nativity scene was really funny with the way that they have it displayed, especially because King Herod has atheist written right across his head, so we know who we're talking about. And then they gave him fangs. He's just like, he's creeping up on baby Jesus, and I actually thought it was hilarious.
I think you hit on one really important thing. You said demonize several times, and then I think you nailed it with the difference between atheists on a completely over-the-top fictional character with fangs, demonizing, literally, compared to Baphomet, where really what the Satanic Temple's trying to do is normalize. So it's almost like they're going the opposite sides of the same sensational coin, though, but for opposite goals.
I think it's funny you say that really quick. I think it's funny you say that because in this case they're trying to demonize using King Herod, and then the Church of Satan is putting up a literal demon, and it's much less demonic.
Yes. You got to understand that. I think that you really illustrated very well, Rob, the fact that it's a very two-dimensional. It's almost like they're making fun of their own story if they stepped back for a second, because whatever story, if I'm telling you a story in real life and all of a sudden I tell you about some creature coming in with fangs, I mean, I just think I've lost all credibility on the whole story. So they take their most important story and they throw big bad atheist Herod with fangs. They should have done, eyes and horns and maybe even a pitchfork to make sure, because they're not exactly subtle. I guess subtlety is not the strong suit. But Cindy, do you think there are broader implications with people doing this? And is this a good thing or a bad thing for us? Do you think people are going to look at this and go, wow, this is kind of absurd? Or do you think they're going to buy into this stereotype?
No, I think it's mostly harmless, to be honest. I don't think it will have much impact. And I don't think it should have a lot of impact because it was, as opposed to the nativity scenes that was previously prevented, this was on a private field. So I don't see how or why we should legislate or say anything about this. Even though I personally believe that the First Amendment crowd in the US is exaggerated. Like, I think all rights should be limited, including free speech. I don't think in this case it's, okay, it's Herod, it has fangs, it says atheist, but it's, to me, it's harmless. It's I really don't see anything too much wrong, apart from the idea that it might trigger an over response and then an over response, and but apart from that, I don't think it's such a big deal.
Yeah, I think that it's going to feed the stereotype to those who already had that deeply ingrained and aren't looking for something different. But I do think that the best thing they could do is go ahead and throw in a couple Disney characters and Nightmare Before Christmas and really hype up their nativity scene like, yeah, there we go, because really it's a work of fiction. So why shouldn't Bugs Bunny and Herod both be in it? But I think that you touch on an important point that also this is private property. And if they want to do that, hey, that's on them. But AJ, what do you think about public spaces being used? Because I know that some of this is a reaction to a previous scene being taken down because it was on public property. So what do you think about the whole public spaces for religious displays, with or without Herod?
I would say that as far as using public spaces for religious displays, the short answer is fuck no. But the long answer is that it seems that a lot of people were upset that Scott, the person that brought the whole issue up, got involved in the removal of the firehouse nativity scene because he didn't live in that town. That is why they were upset. So they claim that the request from the Freedom from Religion Foundation that he contacted and, they put the complaint to the city was attempting to take away their heritage. But heritage shouldn't be something that is publicly displayed in a place that uses taxpayer dollars to function, right? Like in a fire station. Like, I think what they don't realize is that what he did is a good thing. He didn't look away and say, not my town, not my problem. Like, do I think that there's other things that that we shouldn't stick our nose into? Absolutely. But in the case of public spaces, yes, I do think that everyone needs to advocate for those that are making bad decisions in those spaces and to realize why those decisions are not right or why they're not helpful to all of the citizens that are affected by it. So if they respected the Constitution and the freedom of religion, they wouldn't find themselves in these situations.
Maybe if we could have Huey, Louie, and Dewey as the three wise men, I might be agreeable to a nativity scene with on public ground. But seriously, Rob, do you think this is because, well, here I am talking about how old I am. Do you think a Satanic Panic version 2.0, do you think that's something that's likely?
Ultimately, no. I think, again, because there are more non-religious people than has ever been in America is going up, the Satanic Panic version 2.0, Satanic Panic 2 Electric Boogaloo is less likely to happen as a widespread thing. I do not think it is a coincidence that if we think back to like the 1950s, where more people were more religious, and then as people became less religious generally, or they're differently religioned, at the same time, the super entrenched Christians, especially with their persecution complex, have taken over more and more of the government. Now, one could say that the government was predominantly Christian before that, and I would largely agree, obviously, but laws and systems have been put in place, like the gerrymandering of keeping that going. So it's kind of for that reason I don't think a satanic panic is likely to happen, because that requires an outbreak among the mass population. And I just don't think that's going to happen because there's just fewer Christians. That's it.
Yeah.
And
I think that's part of why they react the way they do, because I think they're realizing that the handwriting on the wall is really not in their favor. But Cindy?
Yeah, I wanted to complete what Rob was saying by saying that I think he's right in the idea that there won't be a new satanic panic, especially because I think in the next 4 years, we will see a lot of encroaching of the religious on the public space. And probably in 5 or 6 years, we will see a lot of victimization from the Christian, because they will start losing some of the privilege they will gain in the next 4 years. So yes, I think there will be 4 years now where religion is going to take over in a lot of places, especially with the Supreme Court you guys have. A lot of protections against religion encroachment on the public sphere, on education, on everything like that. I think a lot of this is going to disappear, and Christians are going to take back their privileged position, and there will be a backlash after in 5-6 years. But assuming that there are elections again in 5 years.
Yeah, I think what you said earlier, though, you made a good point that it seems kind of harmless, this display. But at the same time, what you just pointed out, that is the harm right there. It's like it actually is coming into private spaces. The part about it being displayed at the fire station that was a public space is different from it being displayed at the church. At the church is where I find it harmless. At the fire station, I don't. And I think in this specific case, like, we can absolutely respect the church's right to display whatever type of nativity scene they wanted to, right? Even if it demonizes atheists, simply because, like I said, it is a private space and churches are protected by religious freedom laws, which allows them to practice the faith, without government meddling in their business. So that's fine. Like, we should respect that. I'm completely okay with that. It's kind of the same way that the Satanic Temple is allowed to display, Satan's figures and however they wish on their properties, even if it drives Christians insane because of freedom of religion, and it should go both ways. So, but I think the problem here is that the pastor only did this to stick it to the atheists because, he's angry that somebody called him out on their bullshit when they were putting it, all this Christian display at a public space in the fire station. And he said that every nativity scene has to have a herald to remind us that Christians, that they are still being persecuted, and that there is an enemy out there whose real goal is to kill and destroy Christ. So instead of having some accountability and being like, hey, you're right, this is a public space, let us fix it, he was just like, well, fuck you. You can't tell me what to do, even if it's, in everybody else's space. It's like a kid that's like pointing their finger at your nose, but not touching it. Like, look what I can do. It's just childish. It's just, yeah.
See, the trouble here that I have is that harm is relative, because I would not say that this is harmless, but I would say that the harm that this does is potentially so little that I could classify it as that. But I could say that for the same reason that I would say that if we go look at one of the statues of Baphomet, that I find that harmless, but that's because of the worldview that I have, and they would say that this is not harmless. But I look at it and go, you are literally teaching your young children to be scared of and hate these people, which is harmful. Like, this is a problem. I also just think it's so absurd that I then laugh at it, despite the harm that it can and will do. So, on one sense, I kind of look at it as like, you're like, methinks the lady doth protest too much. We're like, oh, you're just pointing out the thing that you're scared of. You are showing us the problem you have. This is really about you, isn't it?
Yeah, and harm can be cumulative also. Like one specific event can be harmless or more or less harmless, but then an addition of small events like this can lead to an effect. So yeah, I agree with you.
And I'm go ahead, Rob.
I was just gonna say, I really hope that nativity scenes now include King Herod. I just think it's really funny.
I think that it should be a default. I think that atheists should start organizing petitions to encourage all nativity scenes to include a Herod with fangs, with the words atheist, with red flaming eyes, because I think this is a great testament to how well Christians live up to their great commission of reaching everybody. Because let me ask you this, how interested would someone who doesn't believe in God be to walk into your church if that's what you had standing outside in front of it as this is our beloved Jesus? I think it's a great selling point. Plus, as they say, all publicity is good publicity. So it's publicity for atheists. So I want to see more King Herods. That's what I want to see in the future. But if you want to see more nonprofits and/or King Herod, click down below.